Well, hello lovely humans and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to talk about my most hated on video I have made to date, and that is the 12 things your guests don't give a flying fart in space about. I have received so many comments on this video being like, you're wrong, I disagree, that's not true, you're totally false, you're only doing these things because you did it at your own wedding and you regret it. And while for the most part a lot of these comments are really kind and so many people are saying thank you so much for sharing these things, I feel so relieved, I felt as though it was necessary to address the other sorts of comments that I still to this day continuously get on this video. So without further ado, let's just jump right on into it. First and foremost, it is important to note that when I first started this channel, I did so because I wanted to create a resource for all of my clients to use throughout their planning as a little bit of help along the way. I had no idea the reach that it would have, and I'm still completely baffled that over 25,000 people have said, yeah, I'll come back for more of this. Like, what? This is insanity to me. So when it comes to my wedding planning experience, it is extremely culturally specific. I don't know a lot about weddings around the world. One person was like, well, she's clearly never been to a Nigerian wedding before. You're right, I haven't. I've never been to a Nigerian wedding. I've never planned a Nigerian wedding. I've only planned weddings in Southern California and now in Hawaii. Got one happening in Washington State. But again, my experience is like a microcosm. It's like a tiny little bit of the wedding world because I just haven't experienced it yet. And by the way, it's not my intention to call anyone out by making this video. I just really want to address some of the more common comments, some of the more common remarks that I've received because I just really want to be clear here. So let's go ahead and address each item one by one and I'll explain myself a little bit better. The first thing that I said your guests don't care about is your invitations. If you guys have been tuning into this channel for a little bit, then you probably saw my own DIY invitations that I did a couple months back, and if you haven't seen it, I'm gonna link it up here for you guys to check out after this video if you're interested. But y'all, I went ham on my invitations. I used wood paper. Like, who does that? This girl uses wood paper and like handmade mold and deckled RSVP cards, and I got custom stamps, and I like trimmed rosemary to put in each and every invitation. The reason that it's included in this list though is because people still throw them away. And I wasn't fooling myself into thinking that every single person I sent an invitation to would keep it forever and ever. That's not to say that some people haven't. I know for a fact that my cousin Brittany still has my wedding invitation. She saved it, and that's really special, and it means a lot to me. But I did it because it was important to me, not because I was expecting everyone to keep them. Because guests in general don't care about the invitations. That's not to say that a small percentage doesn't care, but most of them don't. So the reason this made the list is because if it's not a high priority to you, don't feel like you have to allocate a bunch of funds to make it over the top. Unless you're super into it like I was. And then you can spend as much money as you want to and use wood paper because you're a crazy person. Programs. The reason that I included programs on this list is because, like I said in that video, a bunch of them end up in the trash. That's not to say that there isn't a time or place for programs. Last week's video, I talked about signage, and that was one of the ones I included, like an order of events. These are immensely helpful if you have a multicultural event, or if you have people coming in and haven't experienced your culture before and you want to be able to share that information with them really quickly and really easily. A program is a fantastic way of doing that. But if you're sitting there wondering, do I really need a program? Like, I'm not that into them, then you don't need them. The next item on the list was escort cards. There is a time and place for escort cards. If you have a plated meal, you have to have escort cards, so people know exactly where they're supposed to sit, because your caterer has a legend that they're referring to, so they know exactly where to place the gluten-free meal. Escort cards are important, and there is a time and place for them. But if you have to have them, don't feel like you have to have elaborate ones. Yes, you might need them, but no, you don't need to go all out on them. Unless that's your jam, and then you do you. Guest book is another one that I received some flack for. A lot of people are like, I love guest books, especially if there's photos or if it's more involved. I'm not saying that guest books are useless. I'm just saying adjust your expectations and don't go all out for something that a lot of people don't pay attention to. I wish they did. I had an elaborate guest book for my wedding day. I bought a vintage autographs book. I had an Instax camera, and I replaced all the paper inside the book so it was acid-free and people could put their photos in there, and I stuck it right next to the buffet line so as people were walking or waiting in line for food, they could take a quick picture and write a little note. And y'all, it's halfway full. I'm not saying this because I don't like guest books. I love guest books. I still have my guest book. I think it's super cute. but it's only halfway full. So if you're on the fence with this one, this is my encouragement to you. You have my blessing as a professional in the industry to check that off of your list. But if you're crazy like I am and want to buy a vintage autograph book to have people put Instax photos in, then do it. You just need to realize that a lot of people probably aren't gonna pay attention to it. And if you're doing it for you. And there's nothing wrong with that. Linens are something that guests pay very little attention to. It's just a hard truth. So if you are kind of torn on whether you go for the fancy linens or the plain linens, let that fact encourage you to go for the more cost-effective option because it's not gonna leave a lasting impression on your guests. Unless you want sequins, then you do sequins. Again, I'm not saying that you can't go fancy on the linens, it's just merely an opportunity for you to cut a corner or save some costs if this is something you're not interested in. First dance. A first dance is precious and special. I'm not saying that it isn't important. In fact, it is my favorite part of each and every wedding that I work. If you saw the behind the scenes video that I did in Vlogmas on my second channel, I got teary during their first dance. It's just what I do. It's one of my favorite elements, but a lot of times couples feel pressured into making it this perfect, choreographed, orchestrated event, and that's not necessary. So if you feel like, oh shoot, I gotta make this perfect, don't worry about it. Just sway back and forth with your honey for about a minute and a half and then be done with it. If you want to do a choreographed dance, you can do one, but I'm just saying no guest is gonna leave being like, I'm so disappointed they didn't do the cha-cha for their first dance. Slideshows. I'm not saying that slideshows aren't cool. What I am saying is oftentimes slideshows happen after about 20 minutes worth of speeches, and it can be a little long to have your guests wait through those. I'm not saying you can't have them. I'm not saying pictures of your childhood aren't sweet and people wouldn't enjoy them, but the majority of people would probably prefer to eat dinner or get to the dance floor or get to the cake, and they feel like they're wading through the slideshow. So again, if you're on the fence on this one, perhaps consider cutting it. Open seating. This is the one point that I learned the most from on this video, and that is assigned seating is very culturally specific for the weddings that I work. There are a bunch of places all around the country and all around the world that do open seating as a standard. I just gotta tell you, it's not something I'm used to. So that's why it's included on this list, because I've had several pretty not so great experiences with having open seating. Again, I'm not saying that it's a bad idea. So if you're inclined to do open seating, that's perfectly fine. But as a professional standard, oftentimes we encourage couples to have about a 10% extra of tables and chairs in case the groups don't work out evenly. So this one, I will happily say that I was completely wrong on. Completely wrong on. Do you still need to order more tables and chairs? Yeah, you do. But a lot of people do open seating and it works out just fine. I just don't tend to work a lot of those events, but that doesn't mean that it wouldn't work out perfectly for you. Cake. Oh, this is the one that I got hated on the most for. So many people were like, how dare you? I love cake. I'm not saying that there aren't cake people out there. That's not what I'm saying by this point. What I am saying is, as someone who is there after the cake has been consumed and sees all of the leftovers, I just want to encourage you to think twice before ordering a 7-tier cake if it's not your jam. Don't feel like you have to meet this expectation of a giant grandiose cake when a lot of people don't even eat it. Also, there's a big difference between American fondant and British fondant. I also learned from this video, our fondant tastes different than fondant in the UK. There are a lot of people who don't like fondant here in the US, but in other countries, they make it differently, maybe with actually edible products. Sorry, too far? Again, I'm not saying that people don't like cake. I'm just saying don't go ham with it because you'd be surprised how many people don't end up eating it. That's all. Bouquet toss. This is one that a lot of the couples that I work with now are opting to not do because it makes them uncomfortable. That being said, if you like it, do it. I think a couple people commented, if I went to an event and they didn't do a bouquet toss, I would be upset. And I think that's actually a really sweet sentiment. It is exciting for some people. I'm not saying that everyone hates a bouquet toss. I'm saying a large majority of people wouldn't mind if you chose to skip it. Favors. This one was another very culturally specific item on the list. And I learned from the comment section of this video that there are plenty of people out there who really do appreciate favors. I also learned from this video that there are plenty of people who are like, yeah, you're right, I always forget to take them. So the point here that I'm trying to make is you need to decide if it's worth it to spend all of that money on favors if you run the risk or the chance of going home with 50% of them. If it doesn't feel worth it to you at that point, then don't do them. If your family will behead you because you didn't send them home with a package of Jordan almonds, best believe you better send them home with something. Grand exit. This is one that I still kind of stand behind, only because a lot of your guests will leave before your grand exit happens. So if you're going out and buying enough bubbles or confetti or sparklers for 150 people, you will have leftovers because 150 people are not going to stay throughout the entirety of your event. And oftentimes if you're doing a special choreographed grand exit like this, that means you're paying extra for your photographer to stay throughout the duration of your event. And that's just more money. So if you are looking to cut costs and potentially save a little bit, then consider skipping a formal grand exit. Also, it's just not a lot of people's style. It's one of the main questions that I ask when I'm talking with clients preparing for their day. Do you want to do a grand exit? And honestly, a bunch of them say, no, we just kind of want to hang out with our guests until it's over and then just like naturally taper on out. So if you're on the fence with a grand exit, or if you're considering doing one, or maybe even not doing one because you just don't like the way that it sounds, take all of these factors into account. Maybe purchase less sparklers because you know that not everyone will stay. Or maybe don't purchase anything at all and do that infamous thing I always talk about, like the third grade soccer tunnel, where everyone just raises their arms and you run through the tunnel. You have options here. Just don't feel pressured into having a grandiose grand exit if it's not your style. The entire purpose of this video was not to hate on these items. If you guys have been around here long enough, then you know a lot of these are very precious and very important to me as a person and as a wedding planner. I thrive on the details. I love a well-designed event. I love it when things come together beautifully. I love favors. I go home with favors from events. Honestly, most of the time because there's a bunch left over and the couple's like, yeah, sure, you can take some. Great, I'm going to. But the reason that I made this video is I wanted to free couples from the pressure of conforming to traditions that they didn't subscribe to. That's it. If you feel like any of these are important to you, please do not cut them. I made crazy handmade invitations because they were important to me, not because I thought my guests were all going to keep them. I did a sparkler grand exit because it was important to me, and to this day, they are still some of my favorite wedding photos that we have from our event. I stand behind that, but I did it because it was for me and not for my guests. So if you were on the fence about any of these items, y'all, you don't have to do them. If you don't like the idea of doing a bouquet toss, cut it out. If you don't want to have elaborate favors, maybe don't even offer them at all. The beautiful thing about weddings these days is that you can do gosh darn near whatever you please. And the entire point of this channel is to, one, give you tidbits and advice to help you along the way, and two, help you to feel like you can make your dream day by cutting whatever you want, adding whatever you want. That's all I really want to do. But guys, again, my experience with the weddings is still super limited. There's still so much about the wedding industry across the world that I don't know, and I would love to learn. So with that in mind, jump down in the comment section and let me know something that's unique or you find interesting about wedding culture in your specific area. I would love to hear from you guys. So that's all we have for today, folks. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you haven't done so already, hit that like button down below, subscribe, ring that bell, because I would love to be bringing you more tips and tricks for the modern day bride. And until next week, bye guys!